All right, I've been meaning to talk about this Little Mermaid controversy, which is, I think is kind of, honestly, I think it's kind of silly. It's one of those pop culture war issues that, I mean, how much can anybody really care, right? Like, for the most part, I think that this is one of those controversies that's just skirting the surface of anyone giving an actual shit. The worst thing for me about the Little Mermaid live action Disney trailer is that it was a fucking terrible trailer, right? It's dark. It's hard to see anything. It doesn't really give you a sense that the movie is going to be nearly as colorful, vibrant, or exciting, beautiful as the animated film. I honestly have kind of a problem with Disney's entire project here, remaking live action versions of these wonderful cartoons. Because there's just, even the best live action remake they've done so far, which I think is Beauty and the Beast, is not as good as the animated Beauty and the Beast, which is perhaps the best Disney animated movie there is. What I would rather see Disney do is make movies like Enchanted, which was enchanting. It's a lovely movie. It's one of my favorite Disney live action movies. And that's because it's original. Original music from Alan Menken, fantastic songs. Amy Adams is delightful in that movie. I definitely got a huge crush on Amy Adams from that movie. I was like, can a beautiful princess from another realm please fall off a billboard into my arms? That would be fun. Great movie. And again, because it's original and totally made up from scratch, and it's just such a wonderful sort of parody of Disney movies while still being sweet and still having that wholesome vibe that Disney's trying to go for. Remaking these classic animated movies just opens a bag of worms. You're always begging a comparison to something that is almost always better. Aladdin with Robin Williams was definitely better than the Will Smith version. I don't think that Robin Williams ever went and hit anybody. For one, no, but it was just better. I mean, you can't really compete with Robin Williams, and his genie is just phenomenal. And I don't really care. I know that movie's gotten like accusations of racism or whatever, but I think that's a little overblown. So Halle Bailey, I always want to say Halle Berry. It's Halle Bailey. Is a black woman, black actress who's playing Ariel in this, and personally, I don't care. I don't care. It's a mermaid. Mermaids can be whatever color. Mermaids. Some mermaids in some fictions are hideously ugly monsters, or they're beautiful, but then they turn monstrous and drag people into the deep. I mean, there's a million different interpretations of mermaids, and if they want to make this one black, that's fine. I would say give her strikingly red hair, and you're good to go. I don't have that. I mean, there's the Ariel in the cartoon will always be the original and probably always the best. So they want to make it different in this one. That's fine. I don't care. I have more of a problem with like the recasting of characters like Triss Marigold in The Witcher, because Triss for me was such a distinctive character, and they cast her as someone who just didn't have not just because she was different skin color, but because she was just nothing about her was like Triss, the Triss that I had come to know and also have a huge crush on, a video game crush on. I like the redheads. I don't know what it is. Like, yeah, maybe it's because I've never actually dated a redhead, and I need to date a redhead sometimes so that I have some conflicting feelings about redheads. Anyways, moving on. I don't care, and I don't think you should care that the Little Mermaid is black. I think that like making Snow White not white is much more ridiculous. There's nothing like about a mermaid honestly, I think a mermaid should have like green or blue skin. That would be way cooler than white or black skin. Snow White, on the other hand, who's been cast as a character who's not white, that's weird to me because this is a specific, this character's whole name, a stupid name, but her whole name is based on her skin being really, really, really white. And it's weird to race swap that. I think this is one of those issues where it is actually kind of complicated, but unfortunately, because of the nature of the pop culture wars, it's really hard to speak with any nuance, lest you are cast as either, woke or racist or Canadian. I mean, just like with Rings of Power, I agree that having a more I do think that they could have done a better job with diversity, just making, having some sort of geographical element to why there are, what maybe these elves over here, or from this line of elves, maybe the wood elves in this story, that are darker skinned, or having this, the Harfoots all a little darker skinned because they're from a certain region, or whatever. Having regional geographical things in a medieval setting like that makes sense, but also it's just hard for me to care that much. Like, it's hard for me to get worked up about some diversity in a show like Rings of Power, even though but then on the other hand, like, you do see also people defending the show by just calling everyone racist, and then they sort of sweeping the actual valid criticisms of its writing and production under the rug. So there's just, it's complicated. See, what I like to try to do is respect creative vision. And this, when you look at an adaptation like Rings of Power, you say, okay, well, this is an adaptation. So the creative vision is the adaptation, not the original work. I hope they respect the original work, but they're going to have their own creative vision for this. And, if that means having more diversity, I'm going to try to respect that. The same way I would say that, like, the fact that Jackson's Lord of the Rings didn't have that much diversity, I want to respect that too. I'm not going to call that racist because there's not diversity. Or like Kingdom Come Deliverance, the video game that takes place in like 15th century Bavaria. Like, I'm not going to call that, or was it, anyways, Central Eastern Europe. I'm not going to call that racist because because it's white. Because historically that region was dramatically white. Like, they're obviously not entirely, not 100%, but dramatically white. And again, if Amazon's Rings of Power had been much, much more white, or just had found a better way to incorporate diversity, I would have been all for that and supported that too. I think that, maybe that would have been better. I don't know. It's hard to say because some of my favorite characters in the show are like Disa, who's a black dwarf. And it's like, whatever, I don't care. It's just not that big of a deal to me. Just like with Little Mermaid, I don't care that much. But with something like Snow White, maybe I do. And I guess we all kind of have our own pet peeves and we draw our line in the sand. And I think most people who are talking about diversity issues are not racist. I think the unfortunate thing is that it does provide cover for actual racists. But I think that, no, I don't think that diversity is the central problem for most critics of diversity, specifically in Rings of Power, because I think, these same people are often not that upset by a show like Arcane or other diverse sci-fi shows or whatever. It's not the diversity, it's that in the context of the show, that diversity to them doesn't make sense. And, it doesn't make sense, but for me personally, whatever. I just hope they're casting strong actors. And I wish that more than anything, we would stop talking about this and talk instead about the writing, which has been pretty bad. It's interesting to see how diversity, this push towards more diversity started a lot sooner than modern movies and whatnot. Like, you look at the Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves with Kevin Costner. They brought in a Morgan Freeman into a Robin Hood story. But instead of casting him as just like another nobleman at court, they actually gave him a story, right? He was a Muslim from the Holy Land who Robin saves and then who swears a life bond to. And so he follows him back to England. And sure, that means there's only really one black person in that movie. But in the context of like a Robin Hood history, having one black person is pretty diverse, actually. And it actually gives him substance and story and background and places him in a position where his race does actually matter, right? He matters to the story in an important way. And I think that is it's not just the amount of diversity you put into something, but how that diversity impacts the story does matter. Again, at the same time as I say this, I just don't really care that much if they're just going to go colorblind with this stuff. It doesn't really bother me that much. It doesn't bother me at all, really. I think it could be done better, and I think it's a little lazy, and I think it's sort of a shortcut to representation when really representation should involve telling diverse stories or including characters in ways like Morgan Freeman's character in Robin Hood, where that story comes in and affects the larger story, right? I don't know how you do that really in Lord of the Rings, because it really isn't a fiction about race beyond elves, dwarves, and humans, but whatever. I think, again, you could have and a bigger problem with the elves in this show is not that one of them is black. Arendir is probably the most elven looking of all of the elves. They just don't do a great job making the elves seem otherworldly and ethereal. So yeah, that's kind of my position on that. And it's a shifting and evolving position because, I find myself straddling, like, trying to understand both this push towards a more tolerant and progressive world where we do, include more people in our movies and our TV shows and in our fantasies and in everything, right? More representation, more diversity, because we live in a diverse society. And I think that overall that is a noble goal, and one that I think makes the world a better place. But it's often done so poorly, and it often ends up leading to the older fandom feeling like they're under attack. And then the media has a knee-jerk reaction to a knee-jerk reaction to a knee. And it's just this back and forth of hostility and lack of understanding. It's easy to get dragged into because sometimes you do see like really racist comments and you're like, damn, look at all these racists. But you have to remind yourself, okay, like, no, that's not the majority of people. Even the majority of people talking about these things are, there is more to it than that. And we shouldn't always sell each other short. I think in this world, we and especially since social media has been around and since the pop culture wars have gotten so intense and so divisive, we never give each other the benefit of the doubt. And I'm guilty of this too. I can get very defensive, especially when I'm in a Twitter fight or like people commenting on my videos that say shitty things to me. I get defensive. I can also fail to give the benefit of the doubt. But I think it's an important thing to do. I think some empathy, I think listening, I think, walking around with an olive branch instead of walking around with a machine gun all the time is not a bad idea. I think we can do better than this in general. Part of that is listening to each other. Part of that is realizing that the worst things we think about each other aren't always true, and that we should probably always reassess. Are we really really trying to understand people? Or are we just trying to make our opinion? Are we trying to tread all over everybody else with our opinion, knock everybody else over, just steamroll everyone in our path because we're so certain that we're right? When in reality, like, uncertainty is something we should value. We should value the fact that we don't know everything. We should come into these situations with some humility and not always demonize and not always think that we're fucking right about every goddamn thing. So that's what I try to do here on this YouTube channel with mixed results. And, I'm only human. So I'm not always right, for sure. I sometimes can be too strident. I sometimes can become absolutely paralyzed and not know what to say about an issue because it's just the whole thing just is so overwhelming and so unpleasant. And I just think that this is not the only way forward. This is not the only way forward. It doesn't always have to be conservatives versus liberals. It doesn't always have to be, SJWs versus incels or whatever the fuck. There can be nuance. There can be conversation. These things can happen. They can take place. I'm like fucking Mulder here. I should have a sign that says I want to believe behind me because I do want to believe that we can do better than this and that we can have interesting conversations and that we can bridge divides between the new fandoms and the old fandoms and between, wanting to make positive change but respecting the past, respecting the tradition at the same time. I think it's possible. I think it's the only way. Honestly, it's the only way because because everything changes. Everything always changes. We can't say no more change. It's everything going to stay the same. But that doesn't mean that everything has to change for the worse. And it doesn't mean that everything has to change this one specific way. Your way or the highway. And yeah, I'm probably super naive thinking this way, but that's what I think. And I want to believe. Thanks for watching. Peace.